Allegra, your brain science based, self care forward productivity and time management expert. And what does that mean? It means that I help you to get the things done that you want to get done, all while making sure you stay mentally and physically and emotionally well. No, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on the internet, but I am a homeschooling mom, an entrepreneur. I produce and perform stand up comedy. So I'm one of those people who does a lot of things. And the reason why I started this business was because people would come up to me and say, how do you do all the things? And so that's really what Beyond Your Wildest Dreams is all about. It's all about me helping you with the tools that have helped me. And look, maybe every tool doesn't work for you. We're all different. Our brains all work differently. So take what speaks to you and leave the rest. I didn't become like this overnight. I am 52, and so I've had a lot of time to do things the wrong way and then figure out what worked for me. I have been bedridden for 3 months and suffered from depression and anxiety and all the things. And I have figured out what works for me so that I can be as productive as possible. And I often, if you've read any of my books, I've written these 4 workbooks. And I know if you've listened to the audiobook, this is now available as an audiobook. I'm very, very proud. I actually just, I narrated it myself, which was a huge thing for me to overcome, thinking that like, who am I to narrate this book? I am not a voice actor. And it was a wonderful experience. I love doing it. But one of the things that I say at the beginning of my books, and by the way, they're all short reads designed to be read in an hour or less, and they're all workbooks so that you can immediately start using what you're learning, because that's how humans learn best. That's what the brain science shows. Anyway, what I was going to say about that is that at the beginning of the audiobook, I tell my listeners, if you read this book and you feel overwhelmed by the 3 tips I give you in the book, then maybe that's not the right place for you to start on your journey of becoming your best self. Maybe you need to start with mindset. And mindset is what I'm going to talk about today. I do not consider myself a mindset expert. I am absolutely a student of mindset. I've read a lot of books that are directly related to mindset and indirectly related to mindset. And so today I'm going to share with you some of my favorite mindset philosophies. And by the way, this is my website, bywdreams.com. If you want to work with me one-on-one, if you want to find my books, my audiobook link is at the top of this. It's not on all platforms yet. It rolls out very slowly. Every platform decides on their time. But currently it's available on 5 platforms, including Kobo and Apple. So go check it out. And so today I'm going to talk about the mindset tips that have helped me. And because maybe this is the place where you need to start. If you're feeling overwhelmed and even doing one step feels like too much, then maybe you need to start with mindset. And at the beginning of every podcast, I always start with a couple things. So before I go into my mindset thing, I'm going to rewind and do the 2 things that I always do at the top of my podcast, or mostly do at the top of my podcast. And that is, I want to say welcome to all of my listeners. Thank you for joining me from the over 90 countries. And I always like to pick a country from the list to share some interesting facts about. And so today I'm going to share some interesting facts about Uzbekistan, which I've never been to Uzbekistan. And I definitely don't know a lot about it. And so I think it's interesting to learn about these places. Thank you for listening to me. I love to travel. I wish I could go everywhere. I think people and places and culture is fascinating. But instead, I'm just going to have to learn about you from the internet because that's just not where my life is right now. So Uzbekistan, an interesting fact about Uzbekistan is that it is a double landlocked country, which means that it's surrounded by landlocked countries. So in order to get to a coastline, you have to cross at least two national borders to reach one. And it's one of only two double landlocked countries, Liechtenstein being the second. So I don't think I'd been aware that there were double landlocked countries. Landlocked countries alone seem rare to me, but yeah, one of only two. I thought that was fascinating. Uzbekistan was the heart of the Silk Road, which was the ancient trading route between the Far East, the Middle East, and Europe, taking spices and silk and things back and forth. It was considered a super highway, although that's really funny because it took, I don't know if it took years to cross. I just remember reading the story about Marco Polo, and the number that comes to mind, feel free to correct me. By the way, if you're watching live, I can see the comments, so feel free to, look up on Google. But for some reason, what comes to mind was that it took Marco Polo 2 years to go from Italy to China. So feel free to correct me, but super highway, let's call it the super slow highway because it was not a really fast crossing. They have some, oh my gosh, some of the architecture is just amazing. I'm looking at a picture right now of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Samarkand. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Samarkand. And it's beautiful. I'm looking at the mosque in Samarkand, and the tile work is just absolutely stunning. Just gorgeous, glossy mosaics all the way up the minarets, the domes. It looks really beautiful with that beautiful Islamic geometric patterns, like Greek key looking patterns. And it looks really beautiful. I would love to visit that. And then my last interesting fact is that Uzbekistan is a combination of the Turkish words uz, which means self, bek, which means master, and then the Persian suffix stan, which means country. And this is essentially translated as the land of the free. What a beautiful name. And I think it's so interesting that the name of the country itself is a combination of Turkish and Persian words. I just think that explains a lot. So fascinating. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I love having all of you here, and I love learning about your countries. And so if you are watching this live, I can see the comments. And if you have a question, I'm happy to answer it if it's related to what I'm talking about today. And if you are watching this recorded, I will also see the comments. It might take me a little bit longer because I don't always see the notifications. However, this will be uploaded as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. You can watch the video. You can listen just to the audio. I believe it's episode 163. I can't believe it. So amazing. 163 episodes. It took a long time to get to 163 episodes, by the way. If you're joining me, if you're recently joining me, go back and listen and notice what year my first episode was. I think it might be 7 years ago. So look, today's topic is about mindset. I stopped and started my podcast at least twice. Like when I first started it, I was going really, really strong. And then maybe 5 years ago, I started it again. And then and then 2 years ago, I committed to it because I really enjoy doing this. I love speaking to you in this way. And so I really committed to it. And now I've been just in the last 2 years, did I get to over 100 episodes, and now 163. So thank you for joining me. I love being here. You can, if you go back and listen to my stuff, you'll see that I am a student of the things that I talk about. And that's what got me to episode 163. So the second thing that I always do is I draw a card from my little box of positive chaos that fell on the ground. You probably heard it clunk. 1 second. Okay, so I have this little box of positive chaos. It's there whenever I need it. I feel like I always pull exactly what I need to hear from it. And so it just sits on my desk anytime I need a little oomph. We all need a little oomph sometimes. That's just reality. I don't know if you've read the book Ready Player One. The book is so much better than the movie. And I'm not just saying that in the like, oh, there are details in the book that aren't in the movie. No, the movie is a radically different story than the book, including the 3 quests that Parzival has to go on. The quests are so much more interesting in the book, really. And the book is much more of an allegory than the movie is. And the Artemis, the female protagonist, she's very much the philosopher in the story. She's kind of the Hermione to Percival's Harry, if you will, if you want to think of Harry Potter also as an allegory. But she challenges him about how he thinks about things. And one of the really interesting things she says is that she thinks life is basically kind of like an inefficient video game because you are born, or to use gaming terminology, you spawn in some random place on the earth to random family in random circumstances. And then you have to figure out how to stay alive and, gain points, gain energy, gain food, gain weapons, whatever. The weapons could be an education. It doesn't have to be a physical weapon. But she says that, in the game of life, the goal is to just enjoy it, to figure out how to enjoy it and be happy with your random circumstances. So, I think some people assume that I'm just a happy, upbeat person and that I don't have to work at it. No, I'm a happy, upbeat person because I have like these positive cards next to me so that when I need to be uplifted, I have a tool. I have lots of tools available to me at any time because I know what it feels like on the other side, and I hate it so much. I think the thing that most makes me me is that I have a low tolerance for being unhappy. I think some people have a much higher tolerance for being in a space where they don't feel good. I do not. And I'm also, ever since I was a kid, I have, I'd always told myself I had strict rules with regards to substances and, any sort of mind altering anything. I was always like, no, I want to figure out how to be happy without relying on external chemicals. And that's why I have these positivity cards. That's why I always have art supplies around so that I can do that. That's why I pursue different creative outlets, because I'm just trying to win at the game of my life. And that is about finding my joy. So, wasn't planning on going there, but hope that was helpful for someone. And let's pick the card from the back, as I always do. I don't read it first, so I have no idea what it says. When you are kind to others, it not only changes you, it changes the world. Rabbi Harold Kushner. When you are kind to others, it not only changes you, it changes the world. I absolutely agree with that. I forget which book I read it in, but there was a book of I'm guessing it was probably a book on meditation or something. And, I don't know if you've heard this, but they've done studies where monks have meditated in a group setting. So multiple monks together meditating. And then they measure the effect in the nearby town. And there's a documented effect. I should just look this up because I don't want to get it wrong. There were documented benefits to to the area nearby. And I'm going to have to, maybe someone else can look it up. And let me know what you think. But our country was pretty captivated by the peace walk that was happening earlier this year. I don't know if you followed the peace walk at all, but there were some monks who walked from Texas to Washington, D.C. And I tuned in every day and it was beautiful. And you could see how it was rippling out across the country. And so when you are kind, you create a small ripple. I truly believe this. In fact, there's an interesting book called The Field where it talks about the fact that, on a subatomic level, like this space right here looks empty. And if you're listening to the audio only of this as a podcast, I'm just saying that the space around you, it looks like empty space, but that's just the limitations of our vision. In reality, there are teeny tiny little particles bouncing off of each other all over the place. So that, like for me, for instance, this mic, there are teeny tiny particles bouncing between me and this mic, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So fast and so constantly that in essence, me and this microphone are touching. We don't know we're touching, but we're connected by these subatomic particles. Apparently, these subatomic particles are so frantic in their moving that if we could harness the energy in what we see as empty space, we would not need power plants. There's enough energy apparently in a very small space. I forget what the number was, but it was like a ludicrous space. It was like a 4x2, space. So like literally just like spread out your arms in that space that you're taking up if you wave your arms around. Like could power a city. It was something like that, right? There's so much energy. And the hypothesis is that the field is responsible for, when you have a thought about someone and then they call you, well, it's because according to the field, you're actually connected to them through these subatomic particles. And so when you think of that person, they get that thought and then they call you. Or how a lot of times scientific discoveries are discovered on the same time at different parts of the planet. Again, same thing. It's like someone sends that idea out and someone who's attuned to that idea gets it. It's really interesting. There was the book, I forget what the title of the book was, but it was by that author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert. It's called like something magic, or I forget what the title is, but I believe in that book, she's talking about different people's creative process. And one singer that she is talking to, I forget who it was, but he was driving down the freeway and he got an idea for a song. And he basically was like, well, I hope, Eddie Van Halen gets that same inspiration because I'm driving right now. I cannot write this song down. So he was thinking about someone else who might be tuned into that kind of song, receiving it the way he had received it, that moment of inspiration. So according to the field, right, we're all connected. We're all connected by these subatomic particles. And that makes so much sense to me. And so going back to this expression, this saying, when you are kind to others, it not only changes you, it changes the world. You're sending out that positive thought, that positive moment. It's literally being sent out along the field. Now, I think we've all seen those commercials where someone is nice to someone and then the next person is nice to someone and the next person. Yes, it can be that direct, but it can also be as indirect as putting more good energy out there. And honestly, this is why I don't watch horror movies, because I don't want that in my mind and I don't want to be having that feeling. Like as I was saying earlier, like I have a low tolerance for being unhappy. I want to feel good. So that's why I do things like pursue stand-up comedy, So think about what it is that you're taking in and what it is that you're putting out, because it doesn't just affect you, it affects the world. And if you have roommates or if you have family that you live with, you've experienced that firsthand. When one person is negative, blah, it can color the whole atmosphere. But it also takes one person being positive to try and flip everyone back to the other side. So, which do you want to be? I'm very clear about which I want to be. I think a lot of people don't decide. And negative is easy. Positive takes a little more work. But I think it feels a lot better. So, have you decided which side you want to be on? And if so, are you actually putting your energy towards it? Which is a perfect segue to my topic today, which is about my favorite mindset philosophies. So I'm just kind of going to list them off in no particular order, but these are things that have helped me when I'm having a challenging day or when I make a mistake or whatever. And so the first one, I don't remember where I heard this, so I can't give it credit, but it's the idea of, will it matter 2 months from now? So sometimes someone in your life will come to you and complain about something, and they'll feel very upset about it. This happened at work, or this happened while I was driving on the freeway, whatever the thing is. And something that helps to put it in perspective is, and what I mean is, like, when someone is complaining about it in a way where they make it seem like it's a really bad situation, like it's really going to affect them long term. And the simple shift of mindset is, will it matter in 2 months? Sometimes I ask my friends or family that when they say something about what happened at work and it's like this big disaster, and I say, will it matter in 2 months? And they immediately shift. And I'm like, no, it won't. And if it does matter, if they say yes, then you can say, okay, will it matter in 6 months? Like, are you giving, the whole question is around the idea of, are you giving this issue the appropriate amount of energy? Because if it's something that's not going to matter next week, then why are you, being miserable about it? Now, if it's something that's going to matter in a year, then okay, fine. Maybe it does require that level of concern. But a lot of times people give 1 year level of concern to something that's not going to matter in 1 week, just because it's what's taking their attention right now, right? In my class, Harness the Power of Planning, I talk about learning the difference between things that are urgent and things that are important. Those are two different categories of things. And a lot of times people confuse them. They think that something is important just because it's urgent. But a lot of times they're the exact opposite. A lot of times the urgent things are not important at all. They're just something that has a timeline, that has a deadline. You have to get it done by a certain time. That makes it urgent. It doesn't necessarily make it important. Sometimes it is both urgent and important, but usually you're given a long time span when something is important, right? Like, get the proposal to us in 2 months, right? You have 2 months to do it. If you've left it until 2 days before, well, now it's urgent and important, but that was really poor planning, right? If you think about it, like, you could have started working on it 2 months ago. So the first mind shift is asking yourself, will it matter in 1 week, 2 months, 1 year, so that you can have the appropriate level of concern about the thing. So that's my first mindset philosophy. My second mindset philosophy is, when you complain about the everyday things that you have to do, like, I have to walk my dog, I have to do the laundry. This simple mind shift is the get to. Instead of, I have to walk my dog, it's, I get to walk my dog because I have a dog to love and take care of and to love me back. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm grateful for that. Instead of, I have to do laundry, I get to do laundry because I am lucky enough to own clothes worth laundering. So the wonderful thing about this mind shift is that it shifts you from complaining to really feeling gratitude about the thing. It's so easy. And this is actually something that I talk about whenever I'm helping people become more effective with their to-do lists, right? So my first book, the bestseller, the one that's an audiobook now, 3, 2, 1, done. Your to-do list is the perfect place to practice this get to. Turn your to-do list into a get to list, and immediately it shifts you to gratitude, right? Instead of grocery shopping, it's I get to buy food. I get to have options at the grocery store and money to spend on groceries. So that is my second mind shift tip. My third mind shift tip comes from a book called Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. And a lot of self-help, I feel like this book is very different than most other kind of mindset or psychology self-help books, because this one is more intuitive. And I don't know how else to explain it except with that word. Like if you consider all the other ones to be more Western in their thinking and more scientific, like, here's an instruction list, follow it. I feel like Existential Kink is a little more intuitive and creative in its approach to psychology. And the big takeaway I got from Existential Kink was having is evidence of wanting. And this is a really great tool for helping to unearth. It helped me. This tool helped me to unearth some beliefs that I didn't know I had. Okay, we all have these unconscious beliefs that are really kind of running the show if you're not aware of them. And so Existential Kink helped me to unearth these beliefs that I was not aware of. So for instance, we've all had someone in our life, I'm sure, who, and maybe you're not old enough yet, maybe you haven't had this happen, but I've had this happen a couple times where I see someone who keeps having the same thing happen to them. And literally sometimes it's the exact same thing. Like I hate to say it, but there was someone that I knew who kept getting concussions in multiple different ways. Like it was like, how are you getting that many concussions in your life and you're not a professional athlete? Like it was very unusual. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that person, I didn't know this person very well. I don't know what that person's unconscious belief is, but like maybe they think that they're, lesser than from a mental perspective. And so like they're subconsciously allowing these concussions to happen. Okay, I have seen a few instances of people who keep having the same thing happen. Like, like they have a certain object that keeps getting stolen. Okay, just like, so clearly they don't think they deserve that object. It sounds crazy, but it's totally true, right? And one of my spiritual teachers, Mark Vieira, Dr. Mark Vieira, he said, the whole point of life is learning. And you can either learn by choice, meaning read the books, do the exercises, do the self-exploration, or you can learn by the cosmic 2x4 of life coming and smacking you over the head, and that is way more painful. And I've experienced the cosmic 2x4. I experienced it when I was bedridden for 3 months because I didn't know what my boundaries were. And therefore, my body was like, well, we're shutting it down then because this is not sustainable. You cannot keep doing this. And that's another story for another time. If you look at my podcast, at my burnout story, you will hear all about that. Okay. So that was me learning from the cosmic 2x4 of life. Well, if you don't learn, then guess what? The cosmic 2x4 keeps coming back. And I've seen it happen to other people. Now I feel like I'm in the stage of my life where I am actively trying to grow on purpose. So the cosmic 2x4 is leaving me alone because I'm doing my job, which is trying to become better. Like when you think about it that way, it really does feel like a video game. Like the video game's like, you're trying to get it too easy, so I'm going to give you a challenge that's going to force you to level up, or you can level up on your own. Okay. So, going back to Carolyn Elliott, existential kink, having is evidence of wanting. When you look at the patterns in your life, and she doesn't say this isn't for like the everyday thing, right? Like the random one-off thing. We're talking about when the same thing keeps happening to you over and over again. Okay. That's when you should be paying attention. That's when having is evidence of wanting. And I uncovered some, I mean, it was so obvious once I looked at it, but honestly, I was startled when I was like, oh, that's why I keep getting that, because I must, like, for instance, like just a simple one, maybe you're someone who says, how come whenever there's, an event that needs to be planned, people ask me? Maybe it's because you like to feel needed, right? It's simple like that. But for you, it's this huge added weight and pressure, right? And really a boundary issue. But part of you likes feeling needed. And that's why people keep coming to you, because they know you're going to say yes. And you say yes because, again, having is evidence of wanting. On some level, you want that responsibility because it makes you feel needed. And then once you no longer need to feel needed in that way, then you can erect that boundary. Once you're like, no, that doesn't feel good to me, I'm going to erect a boundary here. But you have to become aware of this belief that you might not be aware of. And that's where existential kink really helped me. Two other mindset tips that I'm going to give you. One is there's a book called The Gap and the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And it's such a simple mindset shift, but I think very powerful. And the gap and the gain is basically about the fact that we tend to evaluate our progress against an ideal. So for instance, let's say you want to write a book. I use this as an example a lot because a lot of people want to write books. It's a great goal to have. Get your stories out there. Fantastic. Okay, so let's say you've been writing every day 1,000 words. Kudos to you, right? Except your goal was to write 2,000 words. Okay. And so at the end of 10 days, you've written 10,000 words, but you wanted to write 20,000 words. And so you're bummed because you're so far from your goal. Okay. So the reason why you feel bummed is because you are measuring yourself against your ideal. And that's the gap, right? So that the distance between 10,000 words and 20,000 words, that's the gap. And that's what you're looking at. That's what you're focusing on. And that is why you're bummed out. What Dr. Hardy and I think Dan Sullivan is his co-author, what Dr. Hardy and Dan Sullivan say is that you should be measuring yourself against the gain, which is where you started. So you started with 0 words and now you have 10,000 words. That's amazing. And that when you measure yourself against the gain, that's when you're going to feel good about what you've done. Because the thing is when you measure the gap, that's not motivating. That's not going to keep you moving forward. Like how many people probably have 10,000 words stuffed in a drawer somewhere because they measured themselves against the gap and they decided not to keep going. But if you measure yourself against where your gain, that is what's going to motivate you to keep going forward. 2 years ago, when I decided to relaunch this podcast and take it seriously, I could have easily said, oh my gosh, if I had kept it going by now, I could have been at 500 episodes. What's the point? That would have been measuring myself against the gap. Instead, I said to myself, wow, look at that. I've already got 60 episodes and I have listeners in this many countries. People are still listening, even though I haven't put out a new episode in a year. That was inspiring. That was encouraging. And that's what kept me going. And look, now I've, more than doubled the amount of episodes I have up, and I'm doing one a week. Okay? Because I measured myself. I only recently learned about the gap and the gain, but it's something that I had intuited clearly before because, yeah, I look at how far I've come rather than against the ideal. Because look, I'm 52. I've already missed the ideal in many areas of my life many times. And because of my low tolerance for being unhappy, I had to figure out a way to be okay with that and still move forward. You know how you meet people who you might have met someone who's the same age as me and they seem kind of beat down. I think that's people who measure themselves against the gap versus the gain. I'm the way I am because I measure myself against the gain, not against the gap. And that's my secret to not being beat down by life at 52. Because let me tell you, by the time you get to 52, a lot of things have happened to you. I could easily curse right now. I'm not a big cursor because I like words too much to, just rely on the easy ones to express oneself. But you have to figure out ways to keep yourself moving forward because you just get a lot thrown at you every decade of life. So my final tip, and it's less of a tip and more of a book suggestion. I have recently been listening to a lot of books by James Baldwin, the famous civil rights activist from the 1960s. And because I wanted to read kind of everything he wrote, I also came across a book written by another James Baldwin from 1897. And it's called Four Great Americans. And it's these little mini biographies of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, and Daniel Webster. And it's funny because they don't even talk about the dictionary when they talk about Daniel Webster, which is really interesting. But I have read other books about Franklin, Lincoln, and Washington, and I still learned new things with these books. And so they're fascinating little biographies. They're super short. I would say if you have family and you like to listen to books together, this is a great thing to learn together because you will be inspired by these people's stories. I find endless inspiration in Washington, Lincoln, and Franklin. And I feel like I've read like the good and the bad, and there's still a lot to be impressed by. If you want to read another fascinating autobiography, read the autobiography. I don't remember which one I read. I'll put it in the show notes. But I read an autobiography about Harriet Tubman. Fascinating. Okay. Sometimes it's amazing to read about people who've had completely different experiences than you, so you can see what's possible. And Lincoln, Washington, Franklin, Tubman, James Baldwin, fascinating stories, fascinating people, way harder lives, I think, than I had. And so endlessly inspiring. So thank you so much for joining me today. Next week, be sure to subscribe and like and leave a comment wherever you listen. It costs you nothing and it helps me to know what content is inspiring to you. And next week, I'm actually going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is being outdoors and how good it is for you, how good it is for me mentally, but also too, there's some really fascinating research about the effects of being around trees on your brain that I'm going to share with you. And I'm excited to share that with you. So be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen. Thank you for joining me. And remember, planning makes everything easier. Bye.